Salams, this is People's Dispatch, and you're watching the Daily Debrief coming to you from our studios here in New Delhi with me, Siddhantani. On the show today, the United Nations, its latest report has indicated that the first quarter of 2023 is already the deadliest for migrants aiming to cross the Mediterranean since 2017. In our second story, we'll be looking at the National Health Service in the United Kingdom and the latest round of industrial action on the part of junior doctors, what they're demanding as well as the impact on the broader system. And we round the show off with an update on the murder investigation of Filipino journalist and broadcaster Percy Lapid. First up, over 400 migrants and refugees have drowned in the central Mediterranean during the first 3 months of 2023, making it, like I was saying earlier, the deadliest quarter for those attempting to make the crossing since back in 2017. These figures are from the UN's International Organization for Migration and cover the period from January to March this year. The crossing is already called the most dangerous in the world, with as many as 1 in 6 people attempting to make the journey in search of refuge or better economic opportunities, losing their lives in the attempt. The IOM has also warned that the figure is likely a massive undercount. Abdul joins us now to talk about the findings of the report as well as the underlying conditions that lead to progressively higher number of fatalities among migrants year on year. Abdul, welcome back to Daily Debrief. This crossing has already been identified as the world's most dangerous in terms of the number of migrant lives that are lost year on year. What are the key findings of this report? Of course, the numbers are pretty obvious and tell their own story. But what are the other findings from the report?
So the report is quite clear. It says that this so far this year, in terms of the quarterly number, is the deadliest for the migrants who are trying to cross the Mediterranean to Europe. As per the report, more than 441 people have died from January 1 until the March 30th. This also basically talks about why the numbers are increasing, the numbers of people who are killed in this thing while crossing the sea, why the numbers are increasing. And it talks about the policies adopted by the state, which basically translates into both the European states and the African states from where the migrants leave. So it says that the reason, primary reason behind the increasing number of people being dead or missing in the sea is the deliberate, sometimes because of the policies these governments have adopted of delaying in basically rescue mission. Most of the time, the state, particularly the European state, and in this case Italy in particular, basically has been found of delaying its rescue missions whenever there is a distress call given by the migrant boats, and most of the time these boats are overcrowded. They do not have enough food, they do not have enough water and other amenities, and they're stranded in the sea, in the middle of the sea for days and weeks sometimes. And even after they give the distress call, the states delay the rescue mission, and that delay leads to most of the deaths. The states have also adopted policies which basically restrict the rescue missions carried forward by the NGOs, the human rights groups working among the migrants in the region, and that also leads to, of course, the increased number of people drowning in the sea. So the report says that instead of focusing on restricting the inflow of migrants through various means adopted by the European countries, they should focus more on creating a system in which there is a prompt reply to all the distress calls, and the rescue missions are increased. Of course, given the fact that none of the countries in Europe want the migrants, this is a difficult thing to implement. Nevertheless, the report also talks about how the coastal agencies or the coast guards in countries like Libya or in Tunisia, in other parts, need to be much more prompt whenever there is a distress call given. So this is by and large the basic of the report, this quarterly report of the International Organization for Migration.
So, Abdul, over the past several months or year or so, we've seen a steady sort of increase in support for right-wing political parties and those that are, taking a much more hardline stance in many cases, particularly in terms of, public statements and things like that. The United Kingdom, Italy that you were mentioning, all of these countries are taking a particularly hard stance on migration and sort of propounding this narrative of safe routes for migration and legal routes for migrants to enter the country. What do you make of this narrative, other than complete disregard for the lives and the situation that these people are seeking to get away from and sort of start again?
Well, this is part of the larger European, you can say, because there is no other word to describe it, but the hypocrisy. They know that it is primarily their policies in Africa, in other parts of the world, which basically creates conditions where people cannot live. Most of the people find it difficult to live in their own countries, in Africa and in other parts of the world, because of the poverty, because of the war, because of the conflict. And most of these have roots in the kind of policies which the Western countries have been following for last many decades. That is one. The second thing is, whenever they think that the cheap labor is required, they're quite welcoming to the migrants. If you see in the past, on various occasions, these countries they become the champions of the rights for refugees and the migrants when they need that labor. But when they think that it is not economically beneficial, of course, they try to restrict the inflow of the migrants. In fact, the last month, there was a report by another UN agency which basically talked about how European Union has been complicit in human rights violations in Libya. In fact, war crimes in Libya committed by the Libyan Coast Guard and Libyan security forces. The report in various newspapers indicate that the European Union has spent millions of dollars in kind of creating infrastructure which basically prevents migrants from crossing the sea. This is part of what UK has done recently about kind of creating a transit place in Rwanda and in other places, not letting the migrants or immigrants come. In fact, UK has also paid some money to France to prevent people from crossing the English Channel.
Thanks very much, Abdul, for the update today. Next up, striking junior doctors in the United Kingdom under the banner of the British Medical Association have referred to working at the NHS as similar to operating in battlefield conditions. They've urged the Conservative Party government to come to the negotiating table. The latest strike action was launched on Monday and repeats demand for restorative pay hikes to counter what has been an over 25% wage loss for junior doctors since 2008-2009. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak said he wanted to find a solution, but Downing Street followed up the conciliatory tone of that message by saying that no negotiations will take place unless doctors back down from the 35% hike demand and end their strike action. Anna Vrachar of the People's Health Movement has the latest for us. Anna, in the UK, we're seeing again another mobilization on a large scale in the health sector. Tell us about the latest strike as well as the government's response to it.
So this is the second strike by junior doctors in England in the past month. So if you recall, in mid-March, they took extreme industrial action and they went on a strike that caused the postponement of over 100,000 procedures. So what we're seeing now is the continuation of that same action, and it has been sparked essentially because the government and the health secretary have not been disposed or willing to come to the negotiating table and actually put forward an agreement or something that the British Medical Association could work with. So just, to recap, What the junior doctors are asking is for the government to offer them pay compensation for the last 15 or so years, where their salary increases have not followed inflation and have actually caused a pay cut of almost 30%, which they are now dealing with.
Mm.
And so the BMA is essentially asking for the government to match that and to say, okay, we've spent the last 15 years on cuts, but now we want to make that better, and we're going to compensate what we owe the junior doctors. On the other hand, the government is claiming that what the junior doctors are asking is too much, and that it's just not acceptable for the current budget discussions or for the government itself. Now, what's interesting is that, in addition to junior doctors, we have seen other health workers in the UK taking extreme industrial action since winter, that is since December 2022.
Mm.
And so, the nurses, the ambulance drivers, the physiotherapists, they all went on strike at some point. What differs from the junior doctors is that the trade unions of these health workers were offered something that they then shared with their members and asked their members to vote on. So what they have been offered is a 5% increase, but over a period of time, plus a one-off payment, which would essentially, it's not enough to actually meet the rising costs of living that the workers in the UK are facing right now. And so one of the theories is that the government is waiting for the ballot of these health workers to end, which should happen tomorrow, so at the end of the week, and then to see what they can bargain for with the junior doctors.
Mm.
But on the other hand, the action that is currently taking place is a longer action. It's 4 days. It's something that's very likely to cause severe disruptions and increases of waiting lists in the NHS. But then again, we are seeing massive support for the health workers because people and their colleagues in the NHS know that they're striking for the right cause, not only for their own salaries, but also for a better public health system that would work for all.
Which is a critical point here, Anna, because often these actions are portrayed in mainstream media as only something that looks at just higher wages, but higher wages come in a larger context. The NHS, for example, is short of about almost 150,000 staff. That includes doctors as well as nurses and other allied healthcare professionals. Obviously, people are leaving because of the low wages and then which fuels another cycle of understaffing, which means double shifts and worse work conditions. So tell us the overall picture of the NHS in the UK at the moment.
Well, it's essentially what you said, and that's what several health workers and junior doctors who are currently on strike have highlighted. It's not about the salary increase alone. It's essentially about investing in the NHS, which has been put aside for several administrations for now, and which is now struggling with the burden that has accumulated over these years. So, it's essentially, yes, it's British trained health professionals leaving the NHS, leaving the professions or leaving the country. But then it means that the UK is increasingly relying on recruiting health workers from abroad. So this has implications even outside the UK. It has essentially a very severe impact on health systems in the global south, because we know that in the global south, the working conditions are so bad that the working conditions in the UK, which are not tolerable for European workers, actually look very, very, very good.
Thanks very much, Anna. We'll leave it there for today. Thank you for your continuing coverage of all the various movements to strengthen public health in, of course, Europe and elsewhere in the world. And finally, a court in the Philippines has issued a non-bailable arrest warrant against the former head of the country's Bureau of Corrections, as well as another corrections official, in connection with the murder of June Villamor, who was allegedly the middleman in the contracted murder of journalist and broadcaster Percy Lapid last year. Anish covers the region for People's Dispatch and joins us via video conference with the latest. Anish, developments in the murder investigation of journalist and broadcaster Percy Lapid, the popular Philippine radio host whose death or killing we actually reported on earlier. For the benefit of viewers who might not be aware of the case, could you give us a bit of a recap and also tell us who are these government officials, current or former, belonging to the corrections, the Bureau of Corrections in the Philippines, who have now been issued warrants against?
Yeah, so like beginning with Lapid was known for his grassroots reporting, especially his reporting on the war on drugs and also the anti-insurgency, program that the government or the previous Duterte government was undertaking at the time. He was quite critical of the rights violation that he reported. He was considered like one of those key critiques of from the journalistic fraternity against the Duterte administration. And obviously, like right after Marcos Jr. came to power, less than 2 months after he came to power, Lapid was murdered in a very similar fashion to how many civil society activists, grassroots leaders were killed by unidentified gunmen. And again, the whole thing was somewhat suspect. But at the time of Lapid's death, he was quite popular. He was quite a popular independent journalist, and that actually brought in his killing. Actually, brought in a large level of nationwide scrutiny on his murder and the manner of which this murder happened, because we have talked about this previously, but this was not the first time that a journalist even was killed in the Philippines by so-called unidentified gunmen. And so as the police started tracing under public pressure and the scrutiny of the media as well, it led to a more, a larger web that actually brought in the highest officers of the Bureau of Corrections. Bureau of Corrections is basically the department that handles prisons in the Philippines. And so the Bureau of Corrections chief, apparently at the time, who is Gerald Bantang, had actually or allegedly made the sort of a quotation against Lapid by using middlemen within the prison and by using, mafia gang leaders who were convicted and inside these prisons to actually carry out the murder. So this is the sort of, long line of, a murder connection that actually kind of shocked a lot of people in the Philippines and also beyond, because obviously we had the grassroots movement talking about how the police are turning a blind eye to actual drug smuggling and the mafia that actually facilitates this sort of smuggling and all sorts of criminal activities. But on the other hand, this level of involvement, especially from one of the most senior officers in the department, shows that there was probably something far more serious with the sort of criminalization of the police force.
Which leads us to the next part of the conversation and the International Criminal Court's probe into the Philippine government's war on drugs, Anish. Seemingly unrelated, but when you bring up issues of how sort of widespread the sort of network is, whether it's related to drug smuggling or the trade in drugs and other criminal activities and the complicity of these kind of government officials, there are some dots to be connected there.
I mean, yeah, like on the one hand, we have had Philippines being this one nation that became quite infamous under the Duterte administration for its very violent campaign against drugs. Usually the targets of this anti-drugs campaign were drug users or addicts themselves, people who are essentially victims of the system and not necessarily the ones who are facilitating the system. While a large part of the gangs that actually created this entire thing were more or less untouched. If you look by, if you go by some of the statements and also the manner in which these arrests have happened, we're talking about deaths that have happened that tune to about thousands, more than 5,000 by, or close to 6,000 by government estimates, a very conservative estimate. And the independent estimates put that up to anywhere between 10 to 20,000 people having been killed in a span of 5 to 6 years in the Philippines, and mostly just and a large part of that happened in an extrajudicial manner. And if it's not the police that are involved in the killing, it would be most likely the so-called unidentified gunmen in many of these cases. And those actually bringing up the human rights violations in these cases have actually been, have actually faced the violence themselves several times. In many cases, we have seen critiques of the anti-drugs campaign being the ones who actually got killed will have like a note stamped on them, just calling them drug abusers. So this is the sort of situation that Philippines still is in right now, and much of that violence hasn't subsided despite the change in government. So definitely this whole ICC's intervention or attempted intervention in the anti-drugs campaign and investigating the human rights violation came primarily because a large number of civil society groups within the Philippines have been calling out the government's violent campaign and the kind of the rights violation that actually spills over into attacks on civil society activists as well. It wasn't just limited to drug users or drug peddlers, but also activists who were working on the ground. And so in this instance, like forgetting the entire problematic thing that ICC is built on, we have talked about that in the show plenty of times. But we need to remember that this attempt by the government to not have any kind of independent investigation into the matter, or foreign investigation into this matter, even by institutions that they had supported earlier in the past, shows that there is something far more serious when it comes to bringing people to justice. And now when we see the much deeper connection that the police force and the prison authorities have with these drug mafias, it's quite disturbing in the sense that we're looking at a larger criminalization, a possibly larger criminalization of the system, of the law enforcement system in the Philippines than what is known on the surface at this point.
All right. Thanks, Anish, for that update today. That's all we have on this episode of the Daily Debrief. As always, we encourage you to head to our website, peoplesdispatch.org, for more details on these stories as well as all of the other work we do. Don't also forget to give us a follow on the social media platform of your choice. We'll be taking a break tomorrow, but we'll be back with you same time, same place on Saturday. Until then, thank you very much for watching. Stay safe. Goodbye.